Welcome to What If You Never Existed, a place where reality meets the impossible. I'm your guide into a world of mysteries better left unsolved. Today we'll dive into a story about the Okefenokee Swamp in Georgia, where human disappearances have become part of local folklore. Prepare for a journey from which not everyone returns.
My name is Jacob Miller, and what I'm about to tell you happened to me 3 years ago in the Okefenokee Swamp on the Georgia-Florida border. Until that day, I considered myself a rational man, a biologist studying wetland ecosystems. Now I know that some places on this earth hold secrets that science cannot explain. It all started with a research grant. The university assigned me to conduct a week-long biodiversity study in the most remote corners of the Okefenokee Swamp. This place had always been shrouded in legends. The Seminole Indians called it the land of the trembling earth, and locals still whisper about people who venture too deep and never return. I wasn't supposed to go alone. My colleague Thomas Harris, an ornithology specialist, planned to accompany me but fell ill at the last moment. His words before departure still ring in my ears. "Jake, maybe we should postpone. This time of year the swamp is especially unpredictable." But I was young, ambitious, and full of scientific enthusiasm. Packing my canoe with everything necessary, tent, food for a week, scientific equipment, and a satellite phone for emergency contact, I set off early on an October morning. The first day went perfectly. The sun gently filtered through the cypress canopy, creating a magical play of light and shadow on the dark water. I documented bird species, collected water samples, made notes about vegetation. The swamp seemed alive and welcoming. Even the alligators, usually aggressive at this time of year, kept their distance, lazily watching my canoe with half-closed eyes. By evening, I set up camp on a small island overgrown with Spanish moss. I dined by firelight, recording the day's observations. The swamp filled with night sounds, croaking frogs, splashing fish, the distant cry of an owl. Everything was as usual. But around midnight, something changed. First, I noticed all sounds had stopped, absolutely all. Even the eternal buzzing of mosquitoes ceased. The silence was so complete, I could hear my own heartbeat. Then fog rose, not the usual haze that often shrouds swamps at night, but a dense, almost tangible wall of gray that slowly crept across the water from all directions. Lights began flickering in the fog. At first I thought it was swamp gas. Methane often ignites spontaneously in such places. But the lights moved too purposefully, as if someone was carrying them. They approached my island from different directions, flickering and pulsing in a rhythm that seemed familiar, though I couldn't understand why. I grabbed my flashlight and aimed the beam toward the nearest lights. The light pierced the fog but illuminated nothing, only gray emptiness. The lights momentarily went out, then flared brighter, as if angered by my interference. That's when I heard the voices. At first it was barely distinguishable whispers mingling with water splashing, but gradually the voices became clearer. I could make out individual words in English, though the pronunciation was strange. Archaic. They were calling my name. Jacob Miller. My hands trembled as I grabbed the satellite phone, but the screen showed no signal. This was impossible. The device worked on military satellites and should have picked up signal even in the most remote places. The voices drew closer. Now I could distinguish not one, but multiple voices. Male, female, children's. They were all calling me, promising to show the true beauty of the swamp, to tell secrets known only to the chosen. Among the voices, I suddenly recognized one. My stomach clenched with horror. "Jacob, my son, finally you've come to us." It was my father's voice. But my father had died 10 years ago in a car accident in Atlanta, hundreds of miles from here. The lights now surrounded the island in a tight ring. In their flickering glow, I began to make out silhouettes in the fog. Tall, unnaturally thin figures swaying to an invisible wind. They weren't walking on water. They were gliding above it, their feet not touching the surface. "Don't be afraid, Jacob," my father's voice continued. "It's so beautiful here. There's no pain, no loss, no disappointment, only eternal peace among the ancient cypress trees." I closed my eyes, trying to collect my thoughts. This is a hallucination, I told myself. Fatigue, stress, perhaps spores from some swamp fungus. But when I opened my eyes, the figures had moved closer. Now I could make out their faces. They were people, or what had once been people. Their skin had the grayish tint of swamp water. Their eyes glowed with the same ghostly light as the flickering flames. Some wore modern clothing, tourists and researchers like me. Others wore period costumes, dresses from bygone centuries. And the most ancient were practically naked, their bodies covered in strange tattoos that pulsed with their own light. In the center of the group stood my father. He looked exactly as he had on the day of his death, except his skin was gray and the same ghostly light seeped from his eyes. "The swamp calls you, son," he said, extending his hand. "It chose you before your birth. You thought you were studying ecosystems? No, Jacob. The ecosystem was studying you, and now it's time to become part of something greater." The figures began slowly entering the water, heading toward the island. The water beneath their feet didn't ripple. It remained perfectly smooth, like a mirror. Panic seized me. I rushed to the canoe but found it had disappeared. In its place was only dark water, which now approached the island's shore. The island was shrinking before my eyes. "You cannot resist." My father's voice became multiple, as if all the figures were speaking simultaneously. "No one can. The swamp has taken thousands before you. The Indians knew its true nature. It's not just an ecosystem, it's a living being, ancient and hungry. It doesn't feed on flesh, but on essences. It collects souls like you collect water samples." The water reached my boots. It was strangely warm and sticky, like blood. Glowing particles floated in it, clinging to my clothes and skin. "Stop resisting, Jacob." The figures were very close now. I could feel their breath, cold and smelling of swamp mud. "Join us. Become part of the eternal ecosystem. Here you'll study secrets your science doesn't even suspect exist." I closed my eyes and clenched my fists. In my jacket pocket was a knife, an ordinary folding knife I used for collecting plant specimens. I don't know what made me take it out, but when the blade touched my palm and blood appeared, something unexpected happened. The figures recoiled with a hiss like water hitting red-hot metal. The lights flickered and momentarily dimmed. Blood of the living. My father's voice distorted, became less human. "It burns us, but not for long." I understood. Whatever they were, living blood caused them discomfort. This was my only protection. Continuing to bleed from the cut on my palm, I began slowly backing deeper into the island. The figures followed me but kept their distance. The fog thickened, the lights pulsed brighter, and I realized my blood wouldn't protect me forever. That's when I remembered the legend an old guide had told me before the expedition. The Seminoles believed the swamp could be appeased with a sacrifice, but not of life, of something more valuable, memory of the dead. With trembling hands, I pulled out a photograph of my father from my backpack, the only one I always carried with me. In it, we're fishing together. I'm 12 years old. He's smiling and has his arm around my shoulders. "Take this," I said, extending the photograph toward my father's figure. "Take my memory of him. It's all I have." The ghostly figure froze. The others also stopped, waiting. "You would give your most precious memory?" My father's voice became singular again, almost human. "Yes," I whispered. "Just let me go." The figure extended a gray hand and touched the photograph. The picture flared with ghostly light and dissolved into the air. At that moment, my father's face vanished from my memory. I remembered he existed, remembered facts about him, but couldn't recall what he looked like, how his voice sounded, how his embraces smelled. The figures began to retreat. The fog dissipated, the lights extinguished one by one. "The sacrifice is accepted," my father's voice sounded for the last time, barely audible. "But remember, Jacob Miller, the swamp doesn't forget. It will wait for you. Sooner or later, everyone comes home." When dawn broke, I found myself on the swamp's shore near the visitor parking lot. My canoe was neatly pulled onto shore, all equipment lying beside it in perfect order. The satellite phone showed full signal. The official report stated I had conducted a successful week-long expedition and collected valuable data on Okefenokee biodiversity, but my notes from the last 3 days of the expedition were empty, just blank pages, as if I had written nothing. 3 years have passed. I changed my specialization, now studying desert ecosystems, as far as possible from any swamps. But sometimes, especially on foggy nights, I hear a distant call. Voices whisper my name, promising to show secrets I could study forever. And the most terrifying thing, each day, this call becomes more appealing.
Jacob Miller still works in the scientific field, but now avoids any wetland research. According to him, he has never again seen his father's face, not in dreams, not in memories. The Okefenokee swamp remains a place where people disappear without a trace even today. Over the past 50 years, more than 70 people have vanished there, and the bodies of most were never found. Local guides still tell tourists about strange lights in the fog and voices calling by name. Perhaps these are just legends. Or maybe some places on our planet truly hold secrets better left undiscovered. This was What If You Never Existed. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and remember, not all mysteries are worth solving.